So good afternoon, and welcome to the Why Wool podcast. And this afternoon we are very fortunate to be on the farm of shearer Mary Lake. Hi Mary.
Hi.
So thanks for being here with us today.
Yeah, thank you.
And so I thought this would be a good opportunity for us to get to know you on a little different level, and then also have a chance to have you help everybody learn what a shearer wants when they come to your farm, and the best way to protect your wool and all those good things. So we'll start by learning more about you. So I guess what I wanted to start with, I did some reading on your website about why you do this. Do you want to tell us what got you started in shearing, and your dad and that correlation and everything?
Oh, sure, yeah. Well, I feel like I should, it kind of started in college, where I was going to college with a journalism major, which was kind of great. It's like giving you skills of how to learn about things really fast, and how to be precise and efficient with your words, and so I can tell a story, get my point across, and get in information and research stuff fast. And when I left college, I was working for some magazines in the Burlington Free Press. I had a couple different jobs, and I kept gravitating towards stories about farmers, and also started working part-time on a farm, and slowly realizing that the farm work was actually what I really wanted to be doing, instead of just writing about people or taking pictures of people on farms. So then I just used those journalism skills to just jump right into it. And my first farm job was at an Icelandic sheep farm, Knoll Farm. And the day that I went there was shearing day. So I met Jim McCrae the first day being out there, and then he became a really great mentor for me. And on that day, he was like, "You should come to my shearing school." And so I was
Did you say to him, "This is really cool what you're doing? That's interesting"?
I don't even know if I said anything out loud. I think I just watched him and was just blown away, because it was something that I hadn't really thought about. I knew that wool came from sheep and that it was sheared off, but I did not know what that whole relationship and exchange looked or felt like. And so everything about it was just really interesting. I was like, wait, this is unlike a lot of things. The shearer is connecting with an animal in a really interesting way, and using their body in a really interesting way. And so I was intrigued by it, and I kind of wanted to learn more about it. So I feel like I was probably just nodding and wide-eyed and yeah, I'll be there. And I was there, and then just kind of jumped into it. I started working with the Vermont Sheep and Goat Association with their newsletter. So I was like, I've got these skills, I'll do the newsletter. And I did articles on things I wanted to learn more about, or things people were telling me needed some attention. And mostly I was hearing about how there's a great need for shearers and butchers. And so I kind of was working at the farm. I was working at a health food store and writing these articles on things. And that slowly all kind of came together as something a little bit more meaningful than just trying to make a paycheck. It was all these things are actually very connected and are really meaningful to me, knowing where our food comes from, and caring for the land and animals, and sharing our stories with each other. And so I knew that farming was what I wanted to do, and I was really grasping for how to make it make money. And I was like, I started with nothing, but also no debt. So I was like, okay, I'm starting at square one. I've got no land, no vehicle, how do I become a farmer when I've got that? And so I kind of looked at what I did have, those skills in learning quickly. And the farm I was working at, it's Knoll Farm, and Helen Wybrow runs it, and she and I like got along. She's also a writer, so we kind of, connected that way. And I approached her being like, can I learn from you and work for you and kind of create my own like graduate program? Because I was like, I'm not going to be able to afford to go back to school, or I didn't want to get into debt and go back to school. So I kind of wrote a little curriculum for myself and had her look at it, and I would write little essays or things and she would look over it. So I broke it into 3 parts, because with the goal of it making me like a master shepherd. It was like a master shepherd course for myself.
Yeah.
And I broke it into like animal husbandry, wool handling, shearing, and like fiber arts, and then animal growth, meat production and meat processing. And so in the winter times when I wasn't busy with work from her on the farm, I picked up those other skills. So I took the shearing school, looked into, like, I learned how to spin, I learned how to weave, like I just like jumped into those things. And then with the shearing, when I went to the shearing school, it just clicked. It was like this magical experience where I had this moment where I was like, oh, this is what my body's meant to do. It was like, I've always been really strong and athletic, but not necessarily very like good at anything. Like good at being strong, but not like as coordinated and like top athlete or anything. Yeah. So when I started shearing, it was different. I was like, oh, I think I could be good at this, and I love it. Mm-hmm. And it just seemed like this endless journey. Like I knew there was a really long way to go to get really good at it, and I was excited by that long journey because it's really frustrating. It's really hard to get good at shearing. It takes a lot of practice and time, and I knew that would be hard because there aren't a lot of sheep here, and it's like a lot of variable sheep. Like if I was out west or in Australia or something, I could shear a ton of sheep and they're all very similar, and I could get really good really fast. But other shearers told me it's kind of hard to get good and fast in this area because you're always doing a different type of sheep, and it's just more variable, so it's harder to get good at it. Mm-hmm. But I was kind of like, yeah, I'm into it. Let's do it. And that first shearing school was also really special because a lot of great shearers came out to it. Like the Vermont Shearing School is unique because for every 2 students in the school, there's a professional shearer there. So the students pair up, and there's a professional watching you and helping. And then the professionals walk around and swap buddies. And so it's this great opportunity to get feedback from different shearers. And so the shearers that were there that day were like the top-notch shearers of the area. And I met Kevin Ford that day, and I also met a shearer from Quebec. I met Craig Marcotte and Dan Corngible, and it's like all these, and Chet Parsons, like all these people who are kind of legends, and Liz Willis, and it was something like I kind of knew that they were legends. There was like this air about them where I was like, okay, I'm meeting some important people right now. I better take note and watch them. And then there was the shearer from Quebec who had her son there, and she didn't speak much English. She really just spoke French, but she did a little shearing demo where she did the foot positioning, and her son, who was maybe like 9 or 10, was on her back, and he was holding the shears.
Oh my gosh.
So, and it was just a great demonstration because it was like, you are doing a lot of things at once when you're shearing. You're doing the footwork, like how important the footwork is so important. And you're doing the handwork and machine work, along with being mindful of the animal, the wool, the temperature, everything. So that was really cool. And it was just like this moment where I was like, I want to be a shearer, I want to be a mom. And then like Kevin Ford was wearing this jacket that said like U.S. shearing team, like Norway competition, and I was like, and I want to shear competitively. Like this is all awesome. And so
it like changed your life
it
right
changed
there.
my life, yeah. I went out and I remember like that, like money was so hard. I got the scholarship to take the class. I think I even babysat on top of like the job I had and the work at the farm, and got $300, bought the machine that I had used at the school, and then put posters up saying like you could tear my phone number off. And I got my first shearing job, and it took me like all day to shear 4 sheep, like not all day, but the better part of a day. And she was like, so how much do you charge per sheep? And I was like, I think that people charge like $7 a sheep. And she's like, well, I'm going to pay you $25 a sheep. And I had a $100 bill, and I was like, okay, awesome.
I'm shearing.
This is it. I'm going to start. And then it was like the phone just started ringing and still hasn't stopped. There was a need for shearers, so that was cool.
What I really like about it is a lot of the, for me personally, the thread of the podcast is because I always really believe that people come to what they do really purposefully. And when they find what they want to do, and I think that's especially around farming and animals and land caring, when they find what they want to do, there is that epiphanous moment, right, where you say, this is what I should be doing. You may not do everything right, but there's enough right that you know that this is what you should be doing. So my question is, when you start farming, like you saw this shearing, but did you ever think of any other animals? Like, did you ever say, I'm going to farm and I'll focus on dairy, or like, why sheep?
Yeah. So I had been working at a vegetable farm, and it was the same thing where I was like, I don't have a trailer to pick up cattle. It was just kind of like, I think I'll start with sheep because they were smaller, and I thought like that was a safer thing to do. I was like, if I buy sheep and get rid of them, it's less money than buying cattle, and I can kind of handle that. And I also knew that the sheep were going to give me more than meat. I wasn't even thinking of meat production at this point. I was kind of like land, soil, a little bit soil, not so much soil, but like fiber and land management. I was like, those seem like valuable things. And then in the back of my head, I knew that meat was an option, but I hadn't let myself learn about that yet. I was kind of like in this wool compartment, being like, okay, I think I can start there. And then the more I learned about animal husbandry, the more I realized meat production was going to help me reach the goals that I wanted to reach with like animal quality, wool quality, and those sorts of things. Because with meat production, then I have an outlet for the animals that don't meet all of the criteria for what I want to produce as a breed stock. At that point, I thought I was going to be doing like real purebred Icelandic breed stock and kind of high-end Icelandic wool, like a niche market Icelandic wool. And that's since changed, but what it helped me see was like how with livestock we like mimic nature, or it's kind of our responsibility to mimic nature if we're going to be breeding and having more animals come in. It's kind of like in the wild, this cycle of things happens, and it happens for a really good reason that helps individual species survive. So what do I need to be doing as a shepherd to make sure that the species I'm taking care of is like really thriving, not just surviving, but like really thriving? And selection was like my answer to that. I was like, I need to select the animals who are really top notch. So like the ones that are resistant or resilient to parasites in the way that I want them to be. That they are top notch because they can like thrive off of the grass that I have here. They're hooves are like doing really well. Their horns are like wide and symmetrical. Like things like their teeth and their jaw, like the form of their mouth is like efficient and helpful to them, and like they lamb without complications. So it's kind of like what other animals work really well with my management, I want to have them really continue to thrive. So then I could, when I took out the ones that didn't, the flock just got better and better every year, and now I have a flock that I'm like extremely excited about, and they're really like producing a lot for me, and that feels really good. I kind of feel like
you're kind of coming around.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, it took a while to get here, because in the beginning I was like, I want my animals to have the longest life possible, and that doesn't really help me with my other goals of having like the healthiest life possible. So yeah, there was a lot to it.
Yeah. But it sounds like you have this really thought out, and I think an important thing to mention is, where are you now with the shearing school?
Yeah. Now I'm leading the shearing
the
school.
Leader of the shearing school.
Yeah. Like in a week or two, they'll be doing it for the first time.
Yeah.
But I feel pretty good about it.
Yeah. What a wonderful thing, though, to start and to know what you needed, which is really the idea of what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Because it is, why do we want to start? And then where do we go? Like, we need the community, which is what we see the VSGA as, is the community of people who are going to help and mentor you on this path. And so what's really nice about this is what I see is you had these goals, and you were really good about being able to set down the path to reach those goals. But clearly you had mentoring and help in that. And now it's your turn to help people, which is really cool.
Really satisfying too, because not every shepherd's goals are the same as mine, and I still want to really be able to work with all shepherds. So like some of my customers are animal sanctuaries, so they're not breeding their animals. So what does their management look like? And I'm really into that too. Like, yeah, let's figure it out.
Yeah.
I love talking about that stuff.
Yep. And I think one of the things, because Mary's my shearer, and I think one of the things that I appreciate is your openness to, like, it isn't, I'm going to come here and this is the way I do it, so this is the way you have to do it, or this is the way you should do it, and things. So you're really good at that piece of it, is being open to
the tough part is when you have contradicting goals.
Yeah.
But that is also what makes it really exciting.
Yeah.
So it's kind of figuring out what your goal is, and what goals can you reach, what goals maybe let go of, or I don't know, just like being open-minded about things.
And do you see the shearing school as an opportunity to kind of be a long arm with that idea?
A little bit. The shearing school for me is more like passing a skill. It's like making sure that this is still something that is taught. Because honestly, a lot of people that take the school don't go on to become professional shearers. But everybody at the shearing school shears a sheep. You know, they leave the school knowing how to do it. If they have to do it, they can do it. I think a lot of people end up being like, actually, now I'm going to really call a professional, because I see that the skill of shearing is like a actual, like, it's like calling a plumber something. You know, like there's certain things you're like, I'm not going to try to do that because it's out of my wheelhouse.
Right.
And so that's part of it for me, is sharing the culture of shearing and what an art and skill it is. Because I think it gets overlooked. And I think
so too. I think there's I feel like sometimes there's an attitude that shearing is like someone tinkering with a car, or you need them, but it isn't really, something like highly skilled. But if you see someone who's a highly skilled shearer, you recognize that is a very important and difficult thing to do. And I see it when I see someone shear well, that beautiful footwork you talk about,
Yeah.
and the ease in which you handle the animal in a really difficult situation, and you're
Yeah.
taking care of not only the body of the animal, but your body simultaneously,
Yeah.
and that's an art. It's an art form.
Yeah,
it's like
it takes
dancing
a
art
lot
form.
of a lot of practice and skill to be
Yeah.
able to do it. Yeah, so the school is like, I'm not trying to be like shearing so hard, like don't even try to do it. It's like, oh no, we're actually going to do this really hard thing, and you're going to feel really empowered after you do it.
Yeah.
And you might decide that is better for the animal for a professional to do it, and that's okay. Or you might do it yourself and get better and better over time. Like, I do know people who only shear their sheep, so they only shear once a year, and I don't know how they do it, but I'm so impressed by them, and they do an awesome job. And but I don't know how you could only shear once a year because of all the work that goes into taking care of your body.
Yeah.
Because
That's
it's
just it.
like living like an athlete. So,
Right.
yeah, I like try to eat really good food.
Yeah.
That's probably the hardest part, but like getting the nutrients and energy that I need,
Yeah.
and like replenishing lots of like electrolytes, lots of that kind of stuff, and then like yoga, body work, and yeah.
So when you're taking care of your body, how do you, I'm sure you've been hurt, I'm sure you've been injured, but how do you avoid injury? Is the main thing of avoiding injury, first of all, you have to know your skill.
Yes.
That's kind of a given. But I mean,
Yeah.
as far as your own body, I mean, you can't heft some of these sheep.
Yeah, and a big part of it for me was having confidence in myself.
Yeah.
Like, so it was like knowing the skill, knowing what I was doing, and then like knowing that I was good at it, because then my body relaxed. So I was getting more injured when I was nervous or uptight, either, for whatever reason I got nervous for.
Yeah.
But once I kind of didn't worry about what other people were thinking while I was shearing, and I was really confident in that what I was doing was like the best shearing that this animal could have, because shearing day is the most stressful day of their year. I mean, it's like probably more stressful than lambing, because I feel like they have so many hormones that they can like deal with lambing in
And
a more natural way.
It's a natural thing.
Yeah,
Right.
and then shearing is kind of this unnatural thing that is a consequence of humans, kind of selecting for wool that needs to be sheared, and in the wild they would be shedding their wool, but we've kind of cultivated this kind of this animal that needs our care.
Yeah.
So it's not natural. But the technique with shearing is kind of magical, and it like works with a lot of things that I ended up learning in the slaughterhouse about, like with Temple Grandin, like they're putting pressure on their hips and shoulders. So Temple Grandin, she has autism, but she's like used,
I've seen one of her videos, some of her in her book.
She's amazing. So she's used her knowledge of autism to help handle animals.
Yeah.
And so my body is kind of putting pressure on the sheep's hips and shoulders. And I know the things that really kind of upset the animals, like pulling their legs or grabbing their hooves, or, doing things that are going to make them kick more. But when I put pressure on the hips and shoulders, they calm right down. And that's something that we do in the slaughterhouse so that we can humanely kill an animal. It's like the animal has to be standing still and calm for you to humanely kill it, which makes a lot of sense.
And what do you feel like? I know, our focus is wool, but I'm just interested in what you feel you learn about yourself by helping an animal humanely leave the world. Like, what do you learn about yourself by caring for animals, sharing animals, and not injuring, not just doing it in a haphazard way that's going to be something that doesn't really take into account this animal. And what I notice when you come into the barn is there's a demeanor change, that you kind of make yourself one with that situation of the animal. So in a sense, you're putting yourself at the energy level of the animal. And so your energy level keeps the energy level of the animals down. And that must be something kind of like Zen practice. It must be something that you learn to do. So what do you learn about yourself when you do something like that?
So yeah, like how regulated or dysregulated I am or the sheep are. And that's something that I think about. The shearing and butchering are actually like very similar in a lot of ways, and doing both of them has helped me with both. The main thing that I have learned is that to have good wool, you have to have a healthy animal. And same goes for having good meat and having good milk and having good breed stock. It's like the nutrition, like all of that helps everything. So no matter what you're farming with your sheep, there are these really basic underlying things that are the same for everybody. And it's like, that's what I try to remind everybody is like, slaughtering isn't just like getting rid of your cull animals or getting rid of the animals that aren't good. It's kind of like, I also want really good carcasses and I want really good wool. And the way to get to those two things is all the same. And when I'm selecting the animals to keep, they're just meeting a certain criteria that everybody else maybe doesn't meet, or maybe they do, but I just keep the 5 that do it best. And, but for me to understand that, I like had to see and feel everything. So seeing the wool on a sheep, feeling how my clippers, like feeling how the comb and cutter go through it and cut it, seeing how it falls off, seeing what the animal looks like sheared, there's so many little points of data collection in just that process that was really helpful. And then when I started slaughtering animals from the same flocks I was shearing for, there was like new data that I was collecting, like how the hide peeled away from the carcass and how the fat felt and how the moisture was and what the organs looked like and what the muscles looked like, and all of those things kind of made sense together, and it just became really interesting. And yeah, so I was able to kind of collect some visual data and make some connections that have helped a lot.
And made you more cognizant. The death of the animal seems to have made you more cognizant of the life of the animal.
Yeah, and more appreciative. So now I can because killing animals is like really hard. Yeah. It's not something that ever gets easier. And it definitely, by the end of slaughter season, I'm like ready to be done. Like I'm ready to not be killing animals every day. But what gets me excited about the job is after the animal is killed and it's like opening a present. We're like, okay, let's skin this and see how we've done. Let's go collect some data points and see what the inside looks like. And then we can like get excited about stuff, and I can be like, I can tell that this animal did really well this year because of the way the fat is and the way the wool on the skin is and the way the hooves look. And it's kind of like giving the shepherd feedback, and then they get excited, and then you can like appreciate the meat and the hide and everything just a little even more.
Right.
So
good. What would you say this kind of leads into on a personal level? Like, what is your favorite part of being a shearer, and then what is your least favorite part of being a shearer?
I think my favorite part of being a shearer is like sharing this excitement that I have for sheep, and especially with the hard things that happen, like the flooding. Like it's just like I feel like sheep farming, you can almost be more resilient, and you can really get a lot more back. Like we get meat and wool, and I'm getting so much. Like I kind of been telling this joke lately, like if you give me something sheepy, I will sell the crap out of it. Kind of like I am like making earrings from the horns, soap from the fat. We're like selling skulls, and it's all with this like message of like knowing where your food comes from, and how your food was grown. And so like what we're doing with the pastures here is really exciting, like working to sequester carbon in the soil. Like it's like meat production can be actually really beneficial in so many ways. And small farming can be really good for the community and good for you, and I feel like we should do more small farming. So that's the best part, is it's really exciting. I think the worst part is that I don't get a lot of time with my own sheep. Like, so I still haven't figured out how to just farm and make a living. So I'm like, but I have figured out how to farm like pretty well at a certain scale while working full time somewhere else. And but I spend a lot of time driving for shearing and slaughtering, and that's the hardest part, is just driving so much, because it's kind of scary. Like with the weather the way it is, the road conditions are really variable. Like I think I'm going out one day and it's fine, but then I get like 2 hours south and I'm hitting ice, and so it's like stressful, the driving. And I kind of wish that I could just do everything at home, but it's like a give and take. I can't get all that I want from my shearing and slaughter business without driving to do those jobs. So I'm going to do it.
Yeah, it's the complexity of it.
Yeah.
Now, I just have to kind of swing back a little bit, because as I said, in reading the information on your website and talking about, tell everybody the name of your business and why it's named what it is.
Yeah, so it's Can Do Shearing. So let's see, where do I start with this? Can do. Okay, so like I have 2 kids, 8-year-old and a 5-year-old. And after my now 5-year-old was born, like having kids was a big decision. I was like, okay, I'm gonna stop working at the slaughterhouse full time. I'm gonna grow my shearing business, and I'm gonna raise my kids as a sheep shearer, and I'm gonna like show them the world through sheep shearing. I was like, we're gonna travel for sheep shearing. We're gonna like, this will be my gift to them. But I was like, okay, I'm going all in with the shearing business. And shortly after I had my second son, my dad got sick with cancer, and it was a very quick, like he died within 4 months of like really getting sick. And so his cancer was caused from Agent Orange, from being in Vietnam. And so that 4-month period where he was dying, I was like, I'm the youngest of 5, but for some reason I was like a really positive person for him. Like he could be strong for me and be grumpy and sick and tired and not as nice with my mom and my sister. But I would go and visit him once a week, and we would talk about Vietnam and his life. And because when I was in school for journalism, I had taken a foreign correspondence course, and my teacher was like, does anybody have anybody in their family that's a veteran? Why don't you go interview them? And so when I interviewed him when I was in college, that was the first time he had talked to anybody about Vietnam. So after I had interviewed him for this college project, he kind of reached out to people he had been in the war with, and started going to an annual reunion. So his turn was up. Like he volunteered to host this annual reunion the year he got sick, and he died right before the reunion, like a month or so before. And my mom and sisters and I decided to do the reunion without him. We would do it still with him, without him there. And so all the veterans came from all over the country to Vermont, and they told me all these stories about my dad. And I had always known that his regiment, so he was first wave, first lieutenant in a transportation company, and they were the 321st Transportation Company, and they were hauling high explosives across the country. And their motto was "Can Do," like the 321st Can Do, and it was because he was their first lieutenant, and he was Canadian, he enlisted into the American Army, and they just thought that was crazy, but he was like a good leader, and it was kind of like, we can do this, can do, we're going to follow this crazy Canadian and do this, and it was kind of a joke, but it turned out that they really, respected him, and he did a good job, and so I never knew that was because of him. And then this reunion happened to be the same week as the shearing school where I was teaching. So I was like, I have to leave today because I'm going to the shearing school, but it's just at Shelburne Farms if you want to come visit. So all these veterans who are now like my new adopted dads, they like come to the shearing school and say the funniest things, like, man, I saw her legs and I knew she was strong, but I didn't know she was that strong. Like, it's just hilarious. And they were really loving, and I kind of was like, yeah, Can Do might be the name I've been searching for my business, because I couldn't figure out. And that's what it is.
It came to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how do you feel representing what I love about what you do, part of what I love about what you do, and that you can do it, is that you're a woman?
Yeah.
You know, that's an important piece. And I think the message, you have 2 sons, not just 2 children, 2 sons. And what I love is you go, or they come and you're shearing. And I always think to myself, being the mother of 4 sons, I think to myself, what a great lesson to have them take into the world, that's my mom. Look how strong she is. She can do it, right? I mean, that's my mom. And they're going to carry that forth. And I think, how important is that to you?
It's really important. That was part of finding my confidence as a shearer and a butcher, was like, for me to be able to shear and butcher well, I had to relax in the job. So I had to really dig deep to find the confidence, because it wasn't always in my customers. Because there was such a need for shearing and butchering, there were a lot of times where I was hired because I was the only option, not because they wanted me there, you know? So, and there was a lot of doubt, but usually by the end of the job, they're my biggest fan. But in the beginning, it can be kind of rough and critical. So I had to dig deep for that in myself, and, you know, be able to make my customers feel comfortable and confident in me.
Yeah.
And we also joke a lot, like, sometimes we can't do. And that's okay too. Like, setting, like, it's been a good lesson in, like, not always saying, yes, I can do it, to being like, you know, here's what I can do. Kind of like saying it that way instead of, I can do anything. Yeah. It's like, I'm just going to do what I can do. Yeah. So that's been really sweet too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that I'd like to hear about, like, you know, we're appreciative of all the stuff that you give to VSGA and the community of shepherds, but I also want to know, I mean, this is how you make a living. So it's not just shearing, it's the other things. You're wearing your beautiful earrings. Tell me about what is possible and how we would find you and be able to get hold of you as a shearer, but also get hold of your products.
Yeah. I'm mostly doing my products. What I found to be, like, easiest and for me is just posting them on Instagram. So I use social media, or Facebook. Like, I use social media to be like, here's my small batch of things, or I'm going to have, you know, sheepskins coming in. And I do a lot of, like, wait lists and kind of like first come, first serve on the list, and then sending out pictures, because I'm doing things in really small batches. Yeah.
So what do you have? You have skins, I know that, 'cause I've got some.
Well, so I just did this thing that I have wanted to do since the very beginning, which was kind of like sell something that kind of shows all the things that you can get from lamb, because that's what sets lamb apart from, like, beef and pork, is, like, you can actually get so much more than meat. So so I finally, like, kind of figured out, and also had the timing right, where I had all these products at the same time, because they all you know how it is with sheepskins, you don't know when they're going to come back or whatever. So I had I put it together and I called it the whole shablam, which I thought was funny. A friend came up with that name for me. But the whole shablam is a whole lamb cut and wrapped, a sheepskin, a skull, 2 pairs of sheep horn earrings, and 4 bars of sheep fat soap.
That is the whole shablam.
The whole shablam. It's $900, and it's like, that was it. And I put that up on Instagram, and it got, like, a ton of responses, and I sold enough that in one day to be like, okay, we're good. Like, because it was like, not that many lambs that I had to sell, but I really wanted to sell it this way. And so that's kind of great to be able to do. And so and I just don't have any dreams of getting much bigger than I am now. Yeah. It's just kind of having a big demand and having what I have work well for me. Yeah. And that, because I used to be like, I'm going to have 400 sheep someday and I'm going to be a big sheep farmer. And I let go of that goal because it turned out to not actually be what I really wanted to do. Yeah. Yeah. So, but to make this size flock work, I have to sell more than just the lamb. I do have to sell the sheepskins and the earrings and the skulls.
So how do we find you? How do we find your stuff? The whole lamb. Where do we find it?
Yeah, so on Instagram I'm at Can Do Shearing, and on Facebook I'm just Mary Lake. Yeah, and then my website is marylakeshearing.com. Okay. Yeah, and like all my information's there. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, but also you can also find me through rural Vermont because I'm doing the shearing school and a wool handling
for the shearing
workshop.
School.
Yeah.
Tell us about the shearing school.
Yeah, so
coming.
The shearing school is every year at Shelburne Farms, and it's like the first weekend in September. And then the other thing I'm really trying to do, this will be our second year doing it, is it's like a shearing day prep wool handling workshop. And that is it's a full day thing where we kind of we talk about like how to get the most out of your shearing day, how to look for like all those data points that I was talking about, like how to read your sheep, like how to get the most out of your shearing day. Yeah. And then all the different pathways you can take with your wool, like from composting your wool to like selling it for a lot of money per skein as yarn kind of thing, like going the whole spectrum of all the things you can do and what you would want to do with your wool, like what your wool is screaming to become. How to like look at your animal and be like, what products would be best with what animals I have. And so that's happening in October and through the Vermont Sheep and Goat Association. So those are the skills I'm trying to pass to keep teaching and learn and keep learning about to be a better teacher in them. And then I have a similar thing going on with butchering and slaughter through rural Vermont. So we do I think 4 to 6 workshops a year where we go to a farm, slaughter lambs in the morning, take a lunch break, and then cut a lamb or 2 in the afternoon and talk about how to cut, what ways to cut it, what cuts you can get, how to read, and how to find those little data points and read the carcass, to see how you're doing as a shepherd kind of thing. So, yeah, I'm doing more teaching now, and I like that a lot. It's pretty cool.
Great. That's great. Mm-hmm. So to finish up this part of the interview with you, I'm just interested what other things you like to do.
Not sheep related?
Yeah.
I love, I like perennial gardening. So, and I actually still relate it to sheep, but I can't not do that. But I like to talk, so I talk to my kids about all of this stuff a lot. And we have a beautiful perennial garden, and we collect seeds from the perennials. We'll cut the flowers, we'll split the big plants, and that has been a great way for me to talk to them about lambs and why we slaughter and who we slaughter. And it's kind of like with our perennial plants, we have some of the flowers we let go to seed, and we let those seed become new parent plants. Mm-hmm. Some of the flowers we cut and bring inside and put on a vase. You can put in a vase, put on the table. Mm-hmm. I was like, it's kind of the same with the lambs. Some of our lambs we're going to keep and let them go on to have more lambs, and some of the lambs we're going to process and bring into our table and like admire them. And everything that we don't consume, all of that will go into the compost and then be soil, and then the soil helps grow the perennial plants. Mm-hmm. So it's like this way of teaching a cycle, but instead of like holding meat, we get to like hold pretty flowers, and that's been really. So when I'm like gardening, I'm kind of like
You're in your happy space.
I'm in my happy space
You're in
being
your
like,
happy
yes,
space.
this all makes sense, and
so
it's
great.
beautiful. And I'm not covered in blood right now. I'm covered in like beautiful fragrance, flower smells instead of nasty sheep smells.
That's so great.
Yeah, because
So-
I'm also obsessed with like soaps, things that smell good.
I
Because
am
a lot
too.
of my life doesn't smell very good.
You kind of have to be obsessed with soap
Yeah,
at some level.
totally.
Well, I have to tell you, you are a person that I admire tremendously, and made even better because you're a strong role model and woman, and I'm appreciative of you, and we are appreciative of you. So thank you
That's
so much.
kind of you.
And we're going to go on, and we're going to go to your barn and see what you do.
Yeah,
All right.
sounds good.
Thanks, Mary Lake.
Thank you. So, when I go to a job, I basically, I'm gonna do everything that I don't want a customer to do for me. Like, I'm my worst shearing customer. I never have my sheep in. They've always like eaten before I've gotten there. And like, there's just a lot of setup that has to happen. But sometimes, for today, I just wanted to shear this guy. This is a little ram lamb who's going to another farm, and he's going to be a breeder. And I wanted to shear him now in late August, so he'll grow plenty of wool back on for when he's at the new farm and for the winter, but won't be too woolly and matted come spring. So we'll get him all ready. But I'm doing it like out in the open. So ideally, what this would look like, if you can use your imagination, is that the sheep would be penned in, like in a small pen, pretty close together, like enough room so that they can all lay down if they want to, and they'd have water and be off of feed. So, like just tell people not to feed them the day they're gonna get sheared.
So if you're going to shear on Tuesday morning, do you not want them fed Tuesday morning, but they can eat Monday night?
I'm okay with that,
Okay.
but don't like feed them extra Monday night.
Okay.
Like, just do what you normally do,
Okay.
and it's fine. The thing about feeding, it's okay because we're small flock shearing.
Yeah.
If I was to go out to a flock and do like 400 sheep, and they had all been fed, the day before or the day of, they'd all be pooping and peeing, and it would really mess up the wool and slow me down.
Okay.
And they could also, they're digesting stuff, so they get kicky and all that. But generally, if he doesn't have a full stomach, he's going to be fine. So he's been grazing all day, and I'm just sitting him down, and he's okay. It'll be okay for just
This
doing
is going to be a do what I say, not what I do kind of moment.
Yeah,
Okay, gotcha.
exactly. Yeah. And so the sheep would be penned in nearby. Sometimes, depending on the farm, I'll shear right in the pen with the sheep. Sometimes I shear outside and we pull them out one by one. And I put them back. I like to put sheep back into their pen instead of like shear. Well, we do at your place, we do it a little bit differently, but in general, it's like, and it works well at your place to do it that way. But in general, I like to kind of keep the flock all together. So when we get down to your last couple sheep,
Right.
it's helpful because they want to run in
Exactly.
and go. But sometimes if they don't know where the sheep have gone, they become harder to catch, and then you're like wasting a lot of time trying to catch the last sheep, and they're getting really stressed out. So I try to put them back into the same pen when they're done.
So is
And
there
it-
anything you can do to keep the sheep? Your ideal is to keep the sheep pretty calm.
Yeah.
So just
Yep.
keep them with each other and
Yep.
small space.
Yep. And with water. Water's good.
So water doesn't fill their stomach as well. I think I thought that
Yeah,
it did.
they can cause them to pee, of course, on
Yeah.
the board, but
But it doesn't make their stomach full of water.
yeah, I think for
example.
shearing in this region, it's just kind of nice to. A lot of shepherds want to be able to give their sheep something, so I'm kind of like, don't feed them, but give them water, and they'll be fine. They'll survive the day, and especially if it's pregnant sheep, they'll want water, or nursing moms. But yeah, the timing of shearing is really important. So Icelandics get done twice a year. A lot of times people don't shear their ram lambs because they want everything, all temperatures to be running correctly so that sperm are lively and all that. But I kind of just like to shear the ram lambs in the summertime so they don't have too much for next spring. And I wanted to blade shear for you because I can talk while I'm shearing. And blade shearing is something that I just started doing. So I've been shearing since 2008. And that day I met Kevin Ford and was like, I want to be a competitive shearer. And I did my first competition this year.
Oh, how did you do?
With Kevin. And it was really fun. And it was with blade shearing. And I did great. I mean, I was competing against the US blade shearing team. So there's that. But it was fun. It was great. So, but everything's pretty much the same. And the thing that's kind of cool about blade shearing is that it's so quiet. And you can see, like, that kind of helps me. I like it because it kind of helps them be calm. If you're just shearing for like maintenance, not shearing for harvesting wool,
Right.
then you would shear once a year, and ideally it would be before lambing, like 6 to 4 weeks before lambing. And that, it seems like a kind of a cruel time to shear, but it's excellent time to shear because the sheep are pretty calm and round, and you can shear them really easily and quickly. Their body is like nice and taut and full. When you shear after lambing, the body is really wrinkly and deflated, and the wool is usually kind of cruddy because of milk production, and stress from lambing can come out in the fleece. Like if a ewe has a fever or some other big stress, there can be like a stress line in the staple, and so it can just decrease the quality of the wool and make it a lot harder to shear, which is hard for the shearer but also hard on the sheep.
So tell us, Mary, because if I saw this and I hadn't done it, hadn't had sheep shorn or hadn't seen people shear sheep, you might say, oh, that looks like it hurts a sheep. Can you tell us a little bit about that how it calms them down, or what holding them like that does?
Yeah, so I'm using my legs a lot to hold the body of the animal so that my hands can really worry about how tight the skin is where I'm shearing. So that the skin needs to be tight so that you don't hit wrinkles and cut a sheep. That's kind of your goal, is to like take the wool off cleanly. And when you kind of go for that goal, you don't cut them. So,
and when they're in these positions that you're holding them in, it's basically, I think about like a dog in a thunder jacket.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
like keeping the pressure on them, and then they aren't feeling as stressed. Is that true?
That's true. Yep.
Because they do kind of just calm right down when you hold them like that.
Yeah. And Icelandics are a breed that are gonna not calm down as well as some other breeds. They're kind of more like a wild animal. So their flight zone is more sensitive, and which I like. Like, a lot of people don't like that in a sheep. They want a sheep that comes right up to them. I kind of like having a sheep that that they don't come up to me. I can herd them really easily. I kind of understand. We have a good communication because of that. And if one does come up to me or lets me really pet it, it's usually because I need to, something's wrong, and I need to figure out why they don't feel good.
So he's kind of, or she's kind of giving you a message.
Yeah, she's not acting in her normal way, so something's wrong.
Yeah. Now, if you're at my house and we're not in the field, remember, we're in a barn.
Yeah, in the barn, undercover, because shearing in the sun, even though I'm outside right now, I'm in the shade and on a flat spot.
So you want your shearer to have, if you don't have a flat spot, you should create a flat spot for your shearer.
Yeah.
You should have electricity available.
Yep.
And what other things would you want, you know, when you walk in, what do you want ready for you? You don't want people like arriving with the stuff when you've arrived because you're on a schedule.
Yeah, but like the sheep really need to already be penned in.
Yeah.
Because it takes them a little bit of time to calm down. And this is the same with stressful like travel to a slaughterhouse or anything. They just need like half an hour and some water to kind of get regulated again. And then but if you run all the sheep in and then I just start shearing, their hearts will be pumping. They'll be a little bit more wild. And that can just be dangerous for the sheep and for me.
I was thinking about how you protect yourself from the bicycling, the kicking. Is there I mean, I noticed that you just kind of stopped for a minute. And
yeah, and I put pressure on the hips and shoulders. If you can watch that here. So where my foot is underneath his shoulder, this is also his first time being sheared, so he's like, what is going on? He's separated from his flock.
Right.
There's a lot of things. I kind of relate it to going to the dentist because it's like
Nobody likes it.
Yeah, like having people's
dentist.
fingers in your mouth. It's just like not normal.
It's very stressful.
Yeah. It's the same kind of thing. He's not normal behavior for him to let this happen.
What if somebody says, I have some sheep, I have 2 sheep, they're out in my pasture, it doesn't seem nice to shear them? What would be your response to that? Why
like
shear
it's
them?
cruel to shear?
Yeah, well, you know, the idea that this seems like, why wouldn't I just leave their wool alone? And, you know, so the benefit of doing the shearing.
Yeah, I've gotten that before, where it's like either they're worried about it being harmful to the sheep to shear, or they're saying kind of like, can't nature just take care of itself or something. So part of it is that it's our responsibility to do it once a year because we've bred them to grow so much for us. And the other part is like that this is really stressful for them, but when you know what you're doing, you can make it the least stressful possible. And sheep do kind of seem to remember experiences because I definitely I shear sheep that kind of seem to know what to do next. Like they've been sheared so many times. And the more a sheep is handled, so not necessarily hands on the sheep, but the more a sheep is corralled and herded into a pen and then released after an experience where there was no harm, the more manageable they are.
They remember that.
Yeah, so it's kind of like you got to work with that system a little bit.
Yeah. You know, we were talking when you were sharing about people's handling of their sheep, and I found it fascinating that you were saying that if people grab hold of, you're thinking the fleece is like it doesn't hurt them to grab hold of them by their fleece. And you were telling me about the hand imprint. I think that's an important thing to talk about, so that you know what happens if you mishandle your sheep.
Yeah, and that was something that I learned because of slaughtering. So when you grab the wool and pull the wool, like some people, especially if the animal doesn't have horns, they'll kind of grab like this and move a sheep, and that really bruises them. So when I was at the slaughterhouse and I'd be skinning animals, I could see actual handprints, like whole handprints. And I have to, as a trimmer on the kill floor, I had to trim those handprints out because they're bruises, and a bruise is blood, and blood rots faster, so you have to trim any blood off of a carcass before you put it into the cooler, so that for food safety. So then I was like cutting out these like bruises, and that was like kind of wasting meat, and it also was like, well, if it's bruising them, that must hurt them. And a lot of what I had learned with shearing from those great like shearers I was talking about was the techniques that they had showed me. We were never grabbing them like that. Like the way they taught me how to catch a sheep and sit it down, it was all with a hand lifting the chin up and a hand at the base of the tail, and using flat open hands instead of grabbing. So it's like using your hands like paddles instead of grabbing. And they were taught that for, you know, like the same reason that I was seeing at the slaughterhouse, because it was like, but at some point that little bit of knowledge was forgotten. And
so if you were at your farm and you had to move a sheep, and they don't have, you know, we don't have the skills you have, what would be your suggestion rather than grabbing hold of the wool?
Well, if you can get their space smaller. So if you're using flex net, kind of, if you have them in a flex net paddock, slowly kind of build a smaller one inside of that and kind of get it smaller and smaller. And I even have like lengths of flex net that, you know, that got damaged for one reason or another, and I've made little sections that I can use to corner the sheep. Or when you put them in a barn, getting them, using flex net as like an alley to get them into a pen that is metal panels or a barn. And once you get the space smaller, then you can use your body in a way that is like safer. And when I'm done shearing, I'll show you how to do that.
I also think it's important. I try really hard. I try to make it like a fun, it's like hay day. I try to make shearing day a fun day so I can invite people. So I mean, like, here's a party that you have to work at. So, I mean, being that more hands, not necessarily with the shearer, because I think you probably like, you like people to move the wool, but more hands to move sheep so that it is easier, you're not dragging on them. Is that a good idea, to try to just get enough people so that you can make it so it's not as stressful?
It can be helpful. It can also cause more stress. So you have to kind of be working as a good team, have everybody on board. And you can see I nicked this one just a little bit. But it's not bleeding really. It's like the nick kind of cut the skin. And what that'll look like in a day or so, it's like their own lanolin helps that heal up. Their lanolin's antimicrobial.
So Mary, when they are when they're shorn, then I think another thing that people are concerned about is that they're going to be cold, right? They're cold. Talk about that.
Yeah, so they definitely will feel a difference in having a full fleece and having not a full fleece.
I usually see them feeling great.
Yeah, typically they feel amazing.
Right.
And I feel like one of the best feelings must be getting sheared and then standing out in the rain.
Yeah.
As long as it's not too cold and windy. Rain and then a cold wind can be really dangerous. But for the most part, like, they're totally fine. They have a little, especially with blade shearing, there's still a little bit of wool on there. They only really need like an inch or two.
And how long does it take for that to be back?
Like a month or two.
Okay.
But they also are fully coated in that protectorant, the lanolin, so that helps too with the rain and cold.
So if you were shearing, you want to shear at a time when it's not rainy and windy and cold.
Yeah.
But if you have to, for whatever reason, you would take precautions and keep them inside, or keep them out.
And sometimes, like, if you end up shearing and it's like 0 and that night goes way below 0, and you know that, you can change their feed a little bit. I know some of my customers, they feed corn if it's cold and shearing, because the animals can burn that and stay a little bit warmer.
Right.
So I'm just gonna stand him up. So once you've got your sheep in a pen and you need to catch one, it's good to kind of get low instead of reaching over, like, sometimes tall people reaching over can get the whole flock to just zoom right under you. But when you go in kind of low, it has a different effect. And I try to get a hand under the chin and a hand in the back, and then I push my knees into them. And when I push my knees into him, eventually he pushes against me. And then I've got control of him. And you can move this leg back, and it's like taking a chair out from under them. Like that. So it's kind of like, once you learn that little magic trick, it makes catching the sheep easier, giving shots easier, trimming hooves easier. And sometimes, like, you'll see people grab a back leg. Mm-hmm. And that can be really dangerous because you can grab a back leg and then the sheep kicks and it can really pop a leg out. So sometimes I will just put my hand on a leg and get my hand under the chin really quick. Mm-hmm. But the hand under the chin and putting the chin up really helps. And my hand is flat, so I'm not going like this, because if I go like this, then he can't breathe. But it's like hand up, and I might cup it like that. Or you can stick your thumb across, because they have teeth on the bottom in the front, and they have grinders top and bottom here, but they've got nothing right here. And you just line it up with that little, with where their smile ends. You just go straight across, and you won't get bit, and you can really control them a lot. So if I'm walking this sheep, so I've got one hand there or under the chin, but I'll put it right here to kind of lock it, and then my other hand is just like back here, like a rudder paddle. And so I'm not squeezing, I just have my hand gently kind of pushing him along, and then you can kind of walk him like this. So
now when you have his fleece down, someone ideally will take it and put it in a bag, whether they're doing it by color or...
Yeah, some farms they'll take it and put it right on a skirting table there, and then skirt while I'm shearing the next one, and that's kind of fun because it's like a little race. I try to skirt before I'm done the next one, and then that can be really helpful because then it's all done and ready to go.
And you're trimming hoofs now and checking for hoof health, because especially with this wet weather.
Wet weather, yeah.
I love that program.
So now they've had their shearing done. They're going to take care of the wool, and now what is your, as they go off and you leave for another possibly year, what is your recommendation for hoof care and good husbandry on sheep that have just been shorn?
So hoof care, I'll trim hoofs for small flocks,
right,
but in general, like, hoof trimming should be something that the shepherd's really aware of and probably doing. And if not, like, it most likely needs to be done more often than at shearing time. And with larger flocks, I won't trim hooves because it takes me twice as long once I start doing that. And so I kind of prioritize shearing. And for smaller flocks, it's no big deal. But bigger ones, I'm like, nope. And it also really hurts my back to trim hooves. Because with shearing, this doesn't hurt my body anymore. It feels really good. So I know how to keep my body active in all the positions. Like if you do yoga, you probably have tried to, like, do downward dog and keep your back legs active, like shifting your weight. So I'm doing that the whole time I'm shearing, and it feels good for my body now. But when I stop and hold a position and trim hooves, then stuff seizes up, and
I noticed that when you're shearing, you don't make an arc of your spine. You keep your back straight as you go down so that you're not stretching your spine. Is that intentional?
Yeah, a lot of shearers don't do that. A lot of shearers are more like curved and stuff. That I do it because it feels better.
It seems deliberate.
Yeah. It works better for me that way.